Good morning students, welcome back to the session. Today in this class we will be going to discuss regarding the user operating system interface. What do you mean by a system call and what are the different types of system calls we are having. So these three topics are going to be covered in this today's class. So first of all we will be going to look regarding this user operating system interface. Fine. So user operating system interface, like why we are going for this user operating system interface, in the sense, in order to interact the user with the operating system, how we are going to interact with the operating system. So that is nothing but user operating system interface. Here we can interact with the operating system by means of two ways. Fine. So here you can see here this is the user and this is the operating system. So this user has to interact with this operating system. So by means of what he can interact, in the sense, we will be going to have two methods or two approaches in which the user wants or user is willing to interact with the operating system. Here the first method is CI. CI is nothing but command interpreter. CI is nothing but command interpreter, and second one is GUI. GUI stands for graphical user interface. By making use of these two things, the user can communicate with the operating system. So this is how the user operating system is going to mean actually. How the user is going to interact with the operating system, that is the user operating system interface. So by means and by what approaches the user is going to interact with the system, in the sense, by making use of two approaches. The first one is the command interpreter and second one is the graphical user interface. This command interpreter we can also call it as command line interface. So this command interpreter we also call it as a command line interface. So here when we are going to see here, suppose here we are going to have the user and here we are going to have the operating system. Fine. This we are calling it as an user and here we are saying that as an operating system. Fine. So here what is the main motto is the user wants to interact with the operating system. By what means the user wants to interact with the operating systems? By making use of two methods. The first one is command interface, or we can call it as command line interface, or we can say it as a command interpreter. So these are the two things we can call as. And next one is graphical user interface, we call it as a GUI. So by making use of any one of the things, by CI or by graphical user interface, here the user is going to communicate with the operating system. So this is how this command interpreter and graphical user interface making a path between the user and the operating system. So here these are the two fundamental approaches. So what are the two fundamental approaches we are having? So first one is the command line interface and the second one is the graphical user interface. So these are the two things we are going to have in this command line interface and the graphical user interface. Fine. Here the one technique is to provide a command line interface or a command line interpreter. What this command line interpreter is going to do is it is going to communicate with the operating system. So whatever the commands, command line interpreter, the name itself indicates, by making use of commands or by giving the commands, we are interacting with the operating system. That is the command line interface. Here we can directly enter the commands over here. So whatever the command we want to do with the operating system, that command we have to enter, and by making use of that command we can do some sort of things with the operating system. These are the things that we are going to do in the command line interface or command interpreter. The main thing is command line interface or command interpreter means by making use of commands or by giving the commands we are going to interact with the operating system. And the second approach is by making use of graphical user interface, as we all are very much familiar with graphical user interface, right? So by making use of this graphical user interface also we are going to interact with the operating system. And the next one is we will be going to discuss some points, key points regarding this command line interpreter or command line interface or command interpreter. Fine. Here the first and the foremost thing I have said you is here uh, the user is going to give the commands and those commands will be executed by the operating system as we have seen. So here the user will be there and here the operating system will be there. So how the user is going to interact with this operating system? By making use of command interpreter. So what is the main thing that we are going to do in command interpreter? In the sense we are going to interact with the operating system by giving the commands. Without commands we can't interact with the operating system. So that is the main thing we have to do in the command interpreter. So we have to give a command. So by making that command and by using that command we can do something in the operating system. So here we can only communicate with the operating system by making use of commands only. And in some systems, like in some operating systems, like we are going to have different operating systems, is it not so? So in some operating systems this command line interface is already built in the kernel, will be in the kernel. So like different ways these command interpreter can be uh, installed. So in some operating systems this CI command interpreter will be in kernel. So and in some operating systems we treat it as a special job in the sense one task is there. So this task we have to do. And in some other different operating systems we will be going to have many CIs, many command line interpreters will be there. So these are the three different ways in which we are going to have command interfaces. What I have said you, in some operating systems these command interpreters are going to be there in the kernel itself, and in some operating systems like this command interpreter will act as a special task or a special job. So special task or a special job in the sense whenever we want to execute, whenever the user wants to execute a program, we will be calling on this a special task like this. So in that manner we are going to execute this command line interpreter in some systems. But when it comes to another, in some systems like in the first two things we have seen in the first two things we have seen some it is in the kernel and it is in the special job. So but in some operating systems what it is going to do is we'll be going to have multiple command interpreters, but we don't want all the command interpreters. Among the multiple command interpreters we'll be going to select only one command interpreter based on the user requirement. So when we are going to talk regarding this multiple command interpreters, when we are having those multiple command interpreters, these multiple interpreters, what we call it is known as, we call those are shells. See here. So when we are talking here, some operating systems include this command interpreters. Where they are going to be included? They are going to be included in the kernel, and in other such operating systems like Windows XP or Unix, what they'll be going to do is they'll be going to treat this as a special program, as I have said. So some operating systems will be treating it as a special program, and some operating systems will be going to have multiple interpreters. So we, in some systems we have many command interpreters. What this mean is multiple command interpreters will be going to have. Among the multiple command interpreters, what we have to do is we have to select a single command interpreter. So that when we are having these many command interpreters, we call it as a shell. Fine. These multiple interpreters, what we call it as a we call it as a shell. We are having different shells like sea shell, like bone shell, bone again shell, all these the different shells we are having. So depending on the user requirement, which shell he wants to use or which command interpreter he wants to use, he wants to select only for that particular shell. He shouldn't select all the shells at a time, fine. He has to select whether seashell or bone shell or any other born again shell. So whatever the shell he wants to make use of, he need to select that particular shell. So here if you can see like what are the different shells you are having, in the sense like you will be going to have the bone shell, like you will be going to have the she shell, born again shell, conch shell, etc. So all these are the different shells we are going to have in this uh, we are going to have. So whether depending on the user application, he can use this bone shell, or he can make use of sea shell, or he can make use of this conch shell. So how we are going to select that particular shell, in the sense, or particular command interpreter, in the sense, depending on the user interface. So all the shells provides the majorly a same functionality with minor differences. There will not find major differences between all these shells. All the shells are similar, but when it comes to the functionality of a shell, we find a little bit difference in the functionality of our shells. So based on the user requirement only, whatever the shell he needs to execute, that shell only he wants to take and he wants to execute. So all these shell, which shell he needs to pick up is based on the user requirement. So that is regarding the command interpreter. So what is the functionality of a command interpreter? What do you mean by functionality, in the sense what the command interpreter is mainly going to do? So what the command interpreter is mainly going to do is, whenever the commands are specified by the user, I have said you that here user will be there, here operating system will be there. Whenever the user has given commands to the operating system, it has to get it has to take it and execute the commands, specified command. So that is the major functionality of this command interpreter. So by making use of commands only, we can interact with the operating system, is it not? So by making use of commands only, we will be going to interact with the operating system. So which command is going to be applicable for what, and why he is going to use that particular command is purely based on the personal preferences. So it is purely based on the personal usage. So many commands at this given level, like what are the different commands we will be going to give at this level, are used to manipulate the files. So for manipulation of files, we used to give much of the commands at this command interpreter level. So what are the file manipulations? We can create a file, we can delete a file, we can copy a file, move a file, all the things comes under the file manipulation techniques, fine. So these are the different file manipulations. So for example, in order to implement a particular command, we have two approaches. So the first approach is, this command interpreter itself is having a code, and the command interpreter does not have a code. So we'll be going to see what the command interpreter itself, if the command interpreter is having the code, what it is going to happen, and if the command interpreter does not have the code, what it is going to happen, we'll see. Suppose when we are going to see this command interpreter is containing a code itself. So if this command interpreter is containing a code means, so whenever we are writing some command, what the command I have written is delete is the command on the file, fine. Delete a file, in the sense what it will be going to do, the file is automatically going to be deleted. Why? Because already this command interpreter contains the code for a particular command what we are writing. So that is very much easy. If the code has not written for delete, will the file is going to get deleted? Obviously no. So why command interpreter itself contains a code, in the sense the command interpreter is having a code for delete, is having a code for create, is having a code for copy, is having a code for move. we are not writing code over here, we are just writing the command over here, whether it is a create command or whether it is a delete command or whether it is a copy command, whatever the command may be, whatever the thing may be, what you are doing is we are just writing the command, but we are not writing the code for that command. Make sure of it. That is the difference when we are going to take it. So this is one approach. So if the command interpreter having a code, we just write a delete. It means that it is going to delete a file. Fine. When the command interpreter does not understand the code, means that like it has not written any code in those things. For example, in Unix, what we'll be going to do? So if you want to delete a file, what we are going to do is rm file.txt we'll be going to write. What the thing it is going to happen is, like it seems to be a deleting a file. What are the things inside it is going to happen is, rm means we'll be going to find the rm file. First find the rm file, next this file is loaded onto the memory, and then we'll be going to have the file text implementation that is going to be deleted. So these are the things that are going to be done when we are not having code inside the command interpreter. So these are the two different approaches in which we can implement the commands. If the command is already there in the command interpreter, we just need to give a command. If the command is not, code not is there in the interpreter, like what we have to do is we have to take the file, search the file, we have to load that file onto the memory, and you have to do a specific operation what we are going to do. That is the two approaches. These are the two approaches in which we are going to have. And next one is the graphical user interface. So GUI, or a graphical user interface, like as the name itself indicates, it is an user interface, and we call it as an user friendly also. Why? Because this is the first strategy what we have been used is the command interface, and the second strategy what we are being used is the graphical user interface, right? So this graphical user interface, what it is going to do is it is going to interface with the operating system. So this is also one of the thing in a different way in which we are going to interface with the operating system by means of user friendly graphical user interface. So user friendly in the sense, what is user friendly in the sense? Very much easy. User friendly in the sense, those who have not known regarding anything also can use it. With the minimum basic knowledge they can use all the things. That the thing what we can say is and say it as a user friendly. So user friendly is nothing but with a minimum knowledge or without a basic knowledge they can use the system. So that is the user friendly. So rather than having users, like what it previously in command interpreter what we have done. So in command interpreter, what we have done? So we have written commands, right? We have written commands. The commands are nothing but delete, create. So all these are the commands. We have written the commands in order to do a particular task. But when it comes with graphical user interface, instead of writing the commands, what we will be going to do is we'll create a mouse based window and the menu system use as an interface. Fine. So mouse based window in the sense we'll be going to place the cursor by making use of a mouse on a particular file or a particular directory on a particular program in order to open it. We need not give commands in order to open a file. We need not give write a code in order to open a file. What we are just doing is by making use of this mouse based window, what we are going to do is we are just pointing our mouse onto a particular file and just clicking it, then the file is going to get open. Are we writing any command for that? Are we writing any code for that in order to open a file? No. So that is the graphical user interface. So why we are saying that graphical user interface is user friendly in the sense without any minimum basic knowledge we can use the system. But when it comes to the command interface, we have to know the commands. So in order to copy a file, what the command we have to know? Copy. So copy is the command. If you don't know that command, can you copy a file, the contents of the file? No, it is highly impossible. And the another method what we have done is we have written a code. So what is the copy code, that also we don't know. So in order to overcome the drawbacks of this command interpreter, what we have gone for is, we have gone for the graphical user interface, which is a very user friendly. So we are creating a mouse based window. What is a mouse based window in the sense, so suppose you are having a program, you are having a file, or you are having a directory, whatever it may be, we need not write commands, or we need not write codes. So simply what we'll be going to do is, we'll be going to move the mouse, place the mouse onto the particular file, and we are just clicking it and the file is going to get open. So that is the graphical user interface. So here if you can see, depending on the mouse pointer, so what we are going to do is, here we are clicking a button on the mouse, so that a program is going to be invoked, or a file is going to be select, or a directory is going to be select. Or if you want to have a pull down menu, so we are just clicking one click, so that the pull down menu is coming. So this is the graphical user interface. The first GUI has developed in this Xerox Alto computer in 1973. This is the first graphical user developed. So later it has been widespread by making, like when it has known to all, and when it has widespread in the sense by when the Apple Macintosh operating system has done, then these graphical user interfaces are widespread, and these two can run in Unix systems, and these are open sources. Open sources are nothing but like we can get the software, we can go get the source code then and there itself. So these are open softwares, open source, and these two command line interface and the graphical user interface are mainly used for the interacting purpose. With the whom it is going to interact, in the sense with the operating system it is going to interact. So what is the advantage of command line interface, in the sense it is like by making use of commands we are going to interact with the operating systems, but remembering all those commands and remembering the codes is get a bit difficult. So that's the reason why we have moved to the graphical user interface. In graphical user interface, like we'll be going to have very much simple option. It is an user friendly. So as the name itself indicates, user friendly in the sense we need not remember the commands, we need not write code for it. Just what we have to do is, it's a mouse based window. Like by making use of that, what we'll be going to do is, we'll be going to create, take the mouse onto the file, where which file we have to open. Just place the mouse and click it, then the file will be going to open the directory, or the what the program you want to open, or what on the pull down menus you are going to have. For all the things you will need just to have a click for that. So that is the different ways in which this graphical user interface has been used. So these are the two user operating system interface. How the user is going to interact with the operating system, in the sense what you have to say is, by making use of two methodologies. The first one is the user interface, and the second one is the graphical user interface. So this is how the graphical user interface is going to execute. Thank you all.